Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you. My name is Stuart Schlossman, for those that don't know, and I'm president and founder of MS Views and News. And I created this organization back in 2008 when we just knew that we needed to be able to provide a program that is going to bring education to the MS community. And we started this just in Miami, and things began to grow. And we started a newsletter even way before that, and that also just began in Miami, and now is reaching people in over 90 countries, that newsletter. So, we know that there's a need for the information that we're providing. We know that there are people in other states that want to see our programs. They ask that we start doing our programs outside the state of Florida. Last year, we brought it to Atlanta, Georgia. Our very first program in Atlanta, Georgia, we had 170 people attend that program. It's pretty good. So now we have one coming up in April. And we have one coming up in April that will be in Birmingham, Alabama. The list on the right side of our webpage, as you can see, is just filled with all of our programs that are coming up. All right, and we hope that that list continues. This is just through June. All right, and again, you could just go to the website page and see what's coming up. Possibly you want to go to Orlando. We have a program there happening on March 6th. So just register for the program. April, we're doing in Birmingham, Alabama. May, we're doing in Charlotte, North Carolina. June, we're doing another one in Atlanta, Georgia. Orlando, we'll be doing at the end of June, as well as the one in March. So, and again, you just go back and forth, check out what we're doing, and know where it's happening. Also, there are a lot of pharmaceutical companies that are now having us market their programs, and you can find their information in our newsletter or possibly on the website or the blog. Speaking about the pharmaceuticals, I want to give gratitude to Genzyme, a Sanofi company, for giving us the funding to do today's program. In addition to Genzyme, we want to thank our other sponsors of this program that include Novartis, Accorda, Biogen Idec, Questcor, Teva, and Genzyme even again. And so all of you should know that the pharmaceutical companies, they support everything that we're doing. They know the impact of our programs on the population. They want to enable us to be able to promote and do these programs. And so, yes, we like it when they give us their dollars to do our programs, because that's the only way we can do it. We don't have somebody that we could call Mr. Whomever, Mr. Gates, and say, hey, we need, X amount of dollars to come do our program. So we have to rely on the pharmaceutical companies, and we will continue to use them as best we can for everything that we are doing. With regards to today's program, firstly, today begins a 2-week run where we're doing 5 programs in the next 2 weeks. We've done a lot of programs. We did a lot of programs last year. As you can see, we're doing a lot of programs this year, and we will just continue doing them. The video recording I already told you about, and now to get into today's program. Our first speaker today, we changed the subject, we've changed the program around a little bit. We're going to have Craig Dorne, the attorney, speak to us about caregiver rights and responsibilities. I really think you're going to love what he has to say. I've heard him in the past. We made the mistake the last time of not video recording it. I swore that we had to do this again, and so we are doing it again. And we're going to have Craig come up, and during his talk, Craig allows us to do Q&A during his talk. So if you have something that you want to question of what he's talking about, just raise your hand. Let him call on you. Let's get a microphone over to you, then ask you a question. But if we don't get to you quick enough with a microphone, then he'll just repeat the question for everybody else to hear. After Craig, Dr. Gaudier will come up and speak about switching meds. I don't know if I said that right. Did I say that right? Yes. Okay, thank you. All right. And he's going to speak about switching medications and MS relapse, emerging therapies, current therapies, and so much more. He's got a lot to show you, a lot to talk with you about, but please, with him, hold all your questions until after he finishes, so that way he can get through all of his slides, and then we'll do the Q&A. And again, hold and wait for us to get around to you with a microphone. We'll get around the room. Everybody will get seen. Everybody will get heard. Whoever's got a question, we won't leave here until you're finished. I don't know if that'll happen, but we got to leave sometime today, all right? So, again, let's get started. Let's welcome Craig to the podium, and I want to thank all our volunteers and all of you for coming out today. Thank you. I guess you need your program up.
No, you can figure that one out. All right, good morning, everybody. I want to give you a little bit of a different speech than you get at many of these seminars. We did one of these in Fort Myers, I guess probably about 6 months, 8 months ago, maybe 3 years ago. I'm really bad with time. and it went over pretty well. I'm a practicing attorney here in Florida, so any advice I give you is solely based upon Florida law, but I think it's general principles that will work for anybody that is watching this even outside of Florida. Doing this for over 20 years, I have a lot of fun. I like to talk to people. I like to do things differently. I'm not a very quiet person. I do have a habit of speaking way too fast, occasionally way too loud, and as Stuart's saying, way too soft at times also, so I'll have to project my voice a little bit. But I'm also a professor, so I'm not one of those ones that like to do things in a Socratic method. Please excuse me, I'll have my PowerPoints that are up here. I'm going to have Stuart load them onto the website, so you'll see stuff on there like on FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and stuff like that I'm not going to really be able to lecture you on, but I think it's important things. More importantly, I want to be here to answer your questions. That is what I am here for. I love to speak. I'm a relatively quiet guy. At least I think so. Nobody else really thinks so. But I'm here to really give you what I think you need to know, because way too many people are involved in this and are affected by MS, including myself. My wife suffers from MS. She came up here and spoke to you guys on something related to occupational therapy some months back. They all seem to run into each other. So I like to do this, and it's also why I'm so proud to work with Stuart and help him actually form the 501c3 that we have right now, because I've been involved in this, I can't say from the beginning, because he had his newsletter for probably 26 years before I got around to it, because he's much older than I am, at least by a few months. But if you have any questions, please, as I'm going along, speak. If I'm speaking too fast, raise up your hands, tell me to slow down. I'm from Miami, but my roots are from Brooklyn, so I have a habit of having a little bit of a sound in there. And occasionally, I might speak a little bit too fast. But we're here for you, and including afterwards, if you ever need to reach me or whatever else it is, Stuart has all of my numbers. I am available for phone calls. I do give free consultations because I really want to help out anybody that's affected by MS. Let's see if I'm pushing the right button or the wrong button. All right, down, up. You're sounding like my wife now. Give me directions again. Okay, what is it that we need to know about being a caregiver? Well, caregivers do have rights. They also have responsibilities. So I'm speaking here for both of you all, so you know whether you're affected by MS and you have a caregiver that's helping you, or you are a caregiver. You have to understand what it is to mean to be a caregiver. We're here to help you. We're here to assist you. But we can't do everything for you, and we also can't do things to the point that they affect ourselves. I was working with somebody not too long ago that's very close with me, and they had this caregiver who's helping out one of their family members. Well, the problem is it got to the point that the caregiver could no longer do it. To the point that the caregiver was actually getting injured and trying to help, but refused to ask for help. People have to understand that we do have limitations. We have the things that we can do, we have the things that we cannot do. We have the things that we need to have done, but we're afraid to ask when we need the caregiver to give assistance. If we do not vocalize and we do not speak with each other and we do not have a dialogue going back and forth, we are not doing our jobs. So I want you to realize what it is to mean to be a caregiver, what it is to be somebody that's in need of a caregiver, but understand that you cannot really do it all. We have an obligation to honor the wishes of the person that needs the assistance, but we have to do it within what we have the ability to do. And when we cannot do it, to get the person that can give the assistance. I also want to make sure that the people understand that do not accept the position if you cannot do it. There are limitations, and you have to understand what those limitations are, and we have to understand that there are ramifications for when we accept responsibilities that we cannot handle. Being a lawyer and having seen all the things that people really don't want to see makes me have a drastic effect on things. I was talking with somebody else over here earlier today, that a story that I continue to hear all the time. Well, what happens when the caregiver does something they're not supposed to do? Are there ramifications? So this is some of the things I want to go over here. And since I'm going to be speaking about some things that might be personal to people, and people may be asking questions, I want everybody to understand when we're talking about questions and answers here, we're talking about things in hypotheticals. We don't need people to talk about real things. Even if it may be real or may not be real. However you want to talk about it, if you have a question, I want you to ask the question and I want to be able to give you the answer. So what is it to mean to be a caregiver? Well, a caregiver can be a person that's just rendering assistance. But the biggest problem we're going to find, and I'm going to go forward and give you some information to let you know, guess what, guys? You don't always need a lawyer that's going to charge you money to do things for you. There's a lot of great free resources that are out there for you, which we'll get to in the seminar also. Well, a caregiver can be somebody that's just helping. A caregiver can also be somebody that has legal authority to act. a real healthcare surrogate. It's great to know that you have a spouse that can sit down and actually have some authority by the inherent position of being a spouse. But as our doctor is going to tell us at times, well, guess what? How many people here don't have spouses, may not have children, may not have somebody other than their best friend that's there? Guess what? That best friend cannot do anything. You may have a super nice doctor that knows it's your best friend and may communicate and talk with that person because of something that was told to them orally. That may work great in that primary care setting where the doctor really knows you. But guess what? It's not going to work for you at all when you're in a hospital. So make sure you know what it is that you want to have and make sure that you really give that person the authority, but also understand what is it that authority is that you're giving to that person. You hear these forms, you see these forms that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the seminar, but I don't think anybody really realizes how much power sometimes you're giving somebody over you. I also want people to understand that even though you are a caregiver, you do have certain rights also. You have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right not to be discriminated against. But these powers and these rights are going to be given to you. You have to understand, do I really have them? And without having the legal authority of actually having a form that gives you that authority, that healthcare surrogate form, that durable power of attorney form, you really don't have any rights. Say, well, you can't discriminate against the law. Well, you have legal protections, but at times you may have some of these rights that you think you have, but you really don't have them, and eventually the doctor may say, get out of my face. Understand that when you do certain things, you have the right to express your opinions, you have the right to be the advocate for your client, or your patient, or your friend, or your spouse, but there are limitations on what you're going to do, and there's going to be times also that the doctor has the right to say no legally. Just because you have that healthcare form, that doesn't mean that the doctor is going to do what you tell them to do, because sometimes it may not be medically or ethically viable. Remember to take care of yourself. There's nothing worse than being a healthcare person and being involved in the field to get to the point where you're actually injuring yourself, getting yourself sick, and not taking that time out to laugh, to smile, to drink if you're not in a program that precludes you or you're not on medications that preclude you from doing so. Rest assured, we need to find ways that we can sit down and actually have time to enjoy ourselves. If you do not do that, you're not actually going to be able to do your job effectively. So we have some of these ethical things that we need to make sure that we do. We also have an obligation to treat the patient with respect and make sure that the patient treats us with respect. We have to understand that there's times that the patient is going through things and they may not be as respectful as we want them to be. But you're going to need to talk to that about the patient after the fact when they're through their relapse or whatever's going through or whatever's going on. You got to make sure that you're going to take the time to actually be able to vocalize and speak and understand what it is that you're going through and letting the other person know what it is that they are going through. Having a wife that suffers from MS, I can't tell you how many secrets she keeps from me. It's something that's personal or whatever else it is, but she doesn't want to tell me when she's going through one of her episodes. But how is it that I'm going to be able to assist unless she actually really does tell me? It's not great to keep secrets. So I'm talking from the other side right now. I understand you want to keep your secrets you think you're protecting. Well, coming from the other side, you may not really be protecting. You're probably hurting yourself more than you're actually helping yourself. Because we can only know what we can see. And I know you all are the world's greatest in covering things up. We also, as the caregiver, here's the one where we get to have fun the other way. Understand that we're going to be times when we're going to be manipulated. Well, try not to manipulate us because then there's not going to be times when we're going to know when it's the truth and when it's not the truth. Manipulation will go on with the caregiver, will go on with the patient, and will also go on with the doctor. Rest assured, you're not going to be able to manipulate the doctors too well, especially many of the doctors that are in this field that really know what it is. You say, well, how do you know what I'm going through? You don't have MS. Rest assured, they've seen it, they've heard it, they know it. I'll give you an example on a totally different perspective. Growing up in Miami, we loved the water. I used to ski all the time, hang out with my wife. My wife could never get up on water skis, but she could direct anybody to do it. She would give the world's greatest lessons. No, you did this, you did that wrong, but she could never do it herself. The doctors are in many ways that same type of a person. They have the ability to see it, they know it, they can feel it, they can touch it, and they know it. You may not be able to express it in their language. There are times that we have some of our doctors that don't have the ability to speak to us in our language. But you will find the right doctors, and we have many of the right doctors that actually can sit down and say, I don't understand what it is you're saying. Can you speak to it in my terms? And rest assured, when you sit down and you have the ability to establish that dialogue, you're really going to find out that you're going to get the better course of treatment, and you're actually going to be more effectively treated. I laugh when I go to the doctor with my wife because she speaks in the same language as the doctor because she's an occupational therapist and they speak in language. I have absolutely no idea what's going on, and I tell her afterwards, can you please explain to me what went on there, because now I don't understand, and how can I help you if I don't understand? So work your way through everything and understand what it is that you can do, what you're able to do, what you're not able to do. Now let's understand what the legal effects are. Here's the part where I actually have to sound like a lawyer. Understand that as a healthcare surrogate, understand when you receive a power of attorney or you have some authority over somebody, you're given a capacity, what's called a fiduciary, the lingo words. You have an obligation to that person. If you accept that position with a person, you are now legally liable to that person as well. What does that mean? Well, it's one thing when you're talking about somebody from medical terms. Well, let's make sure that when the patient tells you what they want to have said on their behalf, that you say what it is. If not, you can be sued. Understand that if you sit down and you're taking care of somebody's financial responsibilities, and you sit down and do certain things, and you take money that you're not supposed to do, or you just get alleged and accused of taking something or doing something you're not supposed to do, you can be sued. So there are legal effects of what you do when you undertake that position as well. So what is it that my wife always tells everybody to do? Well, before I go to my doctor, she sits down and she takes out her notepad and she sits down and takes the notes of what she wants to tell the doctor. It's a great thing to do. What is it you want to do when you are that healthcare proxy, when you're that healthcare surrogate, when you have that durable power of attorney? Everything that you do, you want to document. If I'm spending 75 cents over here or $3 over there or $100,000 over here, document what it is you're doing and why you are doing it. It may seem like it's a pain to do it. It may seem like it's not. Why should I have to do this? Well, rest assured, you do have to do it because you've undertaken a responsibility. And not only is it you and the patient, well, what happens ultimately if somebody else wants to get involved, let's say a child or whatever else it is? Unfortunately, when you get to be in certain capacities and you have certain ailments, it seems like the family may scatter. And I don't know who of you are in here, but I've dealt with enough people that have ailments where everybody scatters. They have a habit of coming back at those times when they really shouldn't be coming back, in the last moments or after somebody passes away, and all of a sudden they sit down and start filing lawsuits and doing this and that. That's why we do need to sit down and make sure that we also document what it is we're doing and why we are doing it. Now let's understand a little bit of the legal stuff here that I want you all to understand also. We have the Family and Medical Leave Act. It is an important act that's been created by the government. It gives certain people certain rights. We have to understand who it is that have those rights and understand that it's really only for the immediate family. It's to take care of yourself or to take care of that immediate family member. But many people think, well, this act is there. It affects everybody. Everybody has rights under it. No, there are limitations to the size of the employer, the type of the employer. This is information that Stuart will load up on the website to give it to you as a real quick reference guide. But understand who it is that it is. It's for the spouse. It's for the child. It's for the parent. That includes foster parents. That includes adopted children. It includes the birth of a child. But it does include your first cousin. It does not include that person that you may have certain obligations to as being a healthcare surrogate. The Family Medical Leave Act does not cover all of those people. Should it? Yes. Does it? No. You'll see some of the slides in here that talk about the size of the employers, how long you have to be eligible, like 12 months of employment, how many hours you have to have worked. Unfortunately, I'll be speaking till tomorrow if I try to educate you on everything you need to know under the law. Another important fact that I want everybody to understand. Who you choose, you need to choose wisely. You'll find people that are phenomenal with money, but that are god-awful with people. You'll find people that are phenomenal taking care of people, but you couldn't trust them with your checkbook for 5 minutes. So you'd have the right to sit down and delegate who you're giving what authority to. If you go to a lawyer, many lawyers are going to try and do things the easy way. They're going to come out with this durable power of attorney form that's going to give the person the right to make your healthcare decisions. It's going to give the person the right to go into your checking account, close it out, open up a new account in their name. Yes, they can give people that much in the way of rights. But you can sit down by choosing the right person and going to the right people to get the right level of what it is that you need. To me, it's most important of saying, when I had my kids and they were minors, fortunately now they're grown, I had one person that would take care of my kids, I had another person that would take care of their money. You have the right to do that also. Give each people the rights of what they should have and get the right person to do the right thing. What about those advanced directives? Those are other important things. Understanding that you have the right to be treated in a certain fashion. Well, who's the person that's going to treat you the way you want to be treated? Will that person really honor your wishes? Or I can speak like somebody who I know that's close to me, that would not allow even their spouse to make those final decisions, because the spouse will do it the way that he or she wants versus the way that the patient wants to have it. Now, we have other rights under Hipaa and privacy. I'm actually teaching a class right now for the University of Miami, which I'm having a blast on healthcare ethics. The doctor's not going to like what I have to say right now. It's one thing when you're a patient inside a doctor's office. It's a whole nother thing when you're sitting down and being treated in a hospital. We have the rights to our privacy. I was talking with somebody not too long ago that was being treated in the emergency room. They had this nice private room with a curtain that separated them from the person next to them. It turned out that they knew the person who was in the gurney right next to them being treated, and the doctor's sitting there talking about everything. Not a great place for privacy, is it? You have the right to vocalize and express your opinions and say, "Doctor, I'm not speaking here." You have to find the places that's the time, place, and manner, and what's appropriate. Now, in certain emergency room situations, you may not have the ability to always get the privacy you want, but many times we do have the ability to have the privacy and at least sit down and bring the discussion down about 16 octaves. So understand what your rights are and what you have the right to do, and understand that if you do sit down and fill out that paperwork, you can sit down and have your healthcare surrogate have that conversation outside of that location and discuss things. I have a very good friend of mine who refused to sit down and talk about anything that was medical. Ironically, I have no relationship with the person other than he's an attorney and I've practiced with him for many years. When the doctor would call, he would hand me the phone and says, "Who are you?" And I had no legal relationship or right, but the doctor knew who I was and would talk to me, even though he probably shouldn't have. So finally, I actually sat down and actually created the form, say, "Yeah, doctor, I do have a healthcare surrogate form for my friend over here." Because he could not speak to his family members, he could not speak to anybody, he couldn't really even speak to himself about his medical problems. I have family members that sit down and give me their rights, even though I'm not the closest person to them. Why? Because I will do what the person wants. We have DNRs, the do not resuscitate orders. We have sit down and we have living wills. We have a whole bunch of different forms that exist that are out there. Understand who it is, what it is that you want to be able to take care of those different things. But if you have not involved and you have not informed your caregiver of what it is that you really want to have done, you have not done your job. You all need to do that job. I could sit down and raise a survey in this room right now, and I would say probably better than 50% of you have not told your healthcare surrogate, your proxy, whoever it is that takes care of you, truly what it is that you want. I could take a survey in here and say probably that better than 50% of you have never filled out a living will unless you were admitted to a hospital and you filled out that form there and that form has now been thrown in the garbage. Because nobody else knows unless you end up in that hospital again, and for them to find that record again, probably it's pretty slim unless you're out at one of those hospitals that now has digital records that's there and they're probably not even going to look for it. You need to sit down and actually complete your living wills, complete your forms, and give the people copies of what those wills and what those wishes are. If you actually look at the forms, they're supposed to be mailed to people. I laugh all the time because I'm telling you, I will not fill out that form unless I mail it and put it in the envelope myself. I'm saying I'm not doing this because I know darn well that the people aren't going to mail those to the people that are copied on the bottom of the form. People do not like to speak about what their wishes are. People do not like to speak about what their ailments are, except for maybe to some of their closest friends. And 90% of them will not speak to about their children. And the truth of the matter is, if your child's over the age of 18, they have the legal rights and the authorities, and they can do things if you give it to them. Yes?
Do living wills and durable powers of attorney need to be notarized?
No, they do not, in Florida. They are phenomenal forms. But I can guarantee you that that form sitting on your shelf in your house, or sitting in your safe, even worse, does absolutely no good. You need to give it to the person that you want to have the authority. And you need to understand what those forms do. I have in my office, which I work on with my clients, a power of attorney form that, depending upon what mood I'm in on a given day, is 8 to 12 pages in length. And people say, okay, you're doing that because you want to charge a lot of money. I'm saying no. I've created my form to a point where every single paragraph for every single right requires an initial. And I will sit down with my client and I will make them go through paragraph by paragraph by paragraph to say, is this a power you want to give to that person? Do you want that person to have the power to go to your bank and open up your safety deposit box? Do you want that person to have the ability to go contact your insurance company and make certain changes? Do you want them to have the ability to go meet with your Merrill Lynch, your Smith Barney, your stockbroker, or whoever else it is, and sit down and have the right to make changes to your investments? And I can virtually guarantee you that at least 10% of you in here have created a durable power of attorney form with an attorney or with somebody else that gives the person the right to do all those things and you didn't even realize it. And then they have the problem is saying, well, how do I go about revoking that? Well, you better make sure that you do. Yes?
What about the 5 wishes form? Is that okay for the state?
Repeat.
I'm trying to figure out what the 5 wishes form is because that's not one that I've ever used.
It's a form that hospice put out in which you put your 5 wishes about who you want to take care of you, what things you want to do with your life, or about end of life.
A hospice-based form will be effective. But the question is the court or are the people really going to honor it? It is not nearly as effective as a power of attorney form, as a healthcare surrogate form. I mean, the Florida Bar actually has done a phenomenal thing of putting right up there on their website a form for free for a living will and for a healthcare surrogate for free, created by the bar, 100% enforceable and effective. And these lawyers that are out there that may watch this right now, they may charge you $500 to print out that same form and help you fill in the blanks. That living will sit down and say, do I want to sit down and have life-sustaining devices put on me? Do I want to have feeding tubes? You have the right to add into those forms other things that you want to sit down and control. You control your destiny if you do what you're supposed to do. Nobody likes to talk about it. I had a conversation when I was sitting there and talking over in Fort Myers, and somehow, even though it's not really on my subject matter, I'll bring it up right now also. And it got shifted into a direction from one of the people in the audience that was asking a question talking about wills. Who in here wants to talk about a will? Nobody. Nobody wants to talk about death. Well, the truth of the matter is, I went through a year where my son was in high school where he buried 3 of his friends. It's never too early to talk about a will. But nobody likes to. People say it's not necessary. I've had to talk with more people than I know saying, well, I'm young, I don't need to know about it. Well, what happens when one spouse has their parents, the other spouse has their parents, and they start fighting over the kids? You can have it for a simple thing as a guardianship issue. I don't have a lot of money. You have a kid? Is that something that's worth anything to you? What happens for the people that unfortunately have been involved in relationships? They're now on their 2nd marriages or their 3rd marriages. Or like somebody else who's close to me, and Stuart, no, make no comments on this one, who's been married through 4 wives. Not me. I'm still married 27 years, same lady. She hasn't kicked me out yet. I'm in pretty good shape. But what happens for the children that you want in? What happens for the children that you want out? I've prepared wills where I have to sit down and put in a paragraph inside there, and the person was not telling me anything about this, but it's somebody I represented for years, so I know the truth. Yes, you need to be truthful with your lawyer. You need to be truthful with your doctor. Well, when you create that form, do you realize if you have children from a previous marriage that you may not have spoken to in 10 years and you don't put a provision inside the will that say, for reasons best left between us, I intentionally give nothing to so-and-so, or I've already made arrangements to take care of so-and-so previously? There's a lot of different language you can put inside of a will that sits down and takes that person out of the will. Otherwise, they have the ability to contest the will. Now, the part that got the people the most interested in the other conversation when we had this in Fort Myers, well, who can be my personal representative or executor? Well, realize it has to be somebody within the state, or it has to be a relative of a certain degree, such as an aunt, an uncle, a parent, a sibling, or a spouse. That does not include stepchildren. That does not include my best friend, who happens to live in another state. They do not have the right to come into the state of Florida and act as an executor of your will. Make sure you understand what your rights are. You may have moved from state to state. Yes, that will that you created in New Jersey is effective in Florida. But that personal representative may not be allowed to fill that capacity here in Florida. Understand what it is that your rights are. Speak to people. Don't guess. I was talking with somebody earlier today about another important point. What happens? And I love to give examples. I have one of my good friends who sat down and whose mother passed away. He was the good child, not the bad child. The bad child had all these major issues, had to come back home, live with mom, stayed there for about 10 years, never really had a job, and mom quit claim deed the house to, I'll call, the bad child. Now the good child will no longer talk to his brother because he's the bad child and he didn't deserve that and felt that he took advantage of him. And then I have to go sit down and talk from the other perspective saying, we both know your mom. Your mom was with it. She understood what it is she was doing. You have over $1 million in your bank account. He has nothing. Make sure mom expresses those opinions beforehand. It may be hard to do, but you might save that relationship with that siblings that will no longer speak to each other. It's hard to do. But there are reasons for why people do things. Yes, it could just as easily have been the advantage where mom really didn't understand what mom was doing, in which case you're now ending up in a court case. I had to practically hit my friend on the head with a baseball bat and say, you're not going into court over this. Your mom knew what she was doing. I didn't prepare the will, but I knew that mom knew what it is that she was doing. So it's nice to keep things and try to protect everybody. But in the long run, it's going to cause more aggravation than it's worth. And I can't tell you the number of lawyers that have told their clients saying, well, you really don't want to bring this up to your siblings. You're not going to be here anymore, so don't worry about it. I think that's the wrong way of handling things, not the right way of handling things, because then you're going to break down relationships down the road. But we need to understand what it is that we're doing, what our rights are, what our obligations are. They are all here. But you need to sit down and actually make sure that you comply with the law to give the person the authority to do what it is. You need to make sure that you understand what it is that you are giving up. Because the last thing I want to see is any one of you ever give a durable power of attorney form to somebody, and the next thing you know, you have no money left in your bank account. Fill out your advance directives. Discuss them with your doctor. But merely discussing them with your doctor without filling out the appropriate forms doesn't give the doctor the authority to do what it is that you want to do. Also realize that the doctor is protected by privilege. He really can't talk to your family members unless you give him the authority or give her the authority to speak to your family members. We have more laws than you can possibly imagine. I don't think people even realize that we have different levels of privacy. There are so many laws that are out there and different types of records that are protected more than others. There's protection out there that are specific that they call super secretive type protections for HIV records, for mental health records, for substance abuse records. There are a slew of laws that are out there for people that they don't even know about that give all different rights. I actually felt one time I had to bring my toothbrush into federal court because I thought for sure I was going to be thrown behind bars. Because I represented a facility and they wanted to get information from my facility. They sent out a subpoena and I told the judge, saying, Your Honor, pursuant to Florida law, this courtroom needs to be closed and only people in here that are allowed to be here are X, Y, and Z. And the federal judge says to me, I don't care what federal law says, I'm in federal court. Not realizing that the laws do vary. You still have to understand state law. Fortunately, the bailiff was a much nicer person over there and took the people out of the room and closed and locked the door, which is what was supposed to happen. So realize that, yes, we have problems, and we have people that will do certain things. We have people that will honor the law. We have people that will not honor the law. But we need to make sure that we do everything that we can to protect ourselves within the law. Understand that it's great that we have our children. I may have the most sophisticated 16-year-old that ever existed in life that can handle pretty much anything. But the law will still look at a 16-year-old as a 16-year-old and not as an 18-year-old. Understand that when you create these documents, you need to do them when you're of sound mind. People may laugh. I had somebody calling me the other day that wanted to sit down and have a change to their mother's will. And I said, can you please have your mother contact me? Well, Mom can't contact you right now. Well, that doesn't work that way. Kids will try to take advantage. People will try to take advantage. We have to do things when we can do something. What does that mean? That means while you're all of the ability and of the sound mind, do it now. Don't leave this for a time when you really cannot do things. You cannot stall, you cannot delay, you cannot forget about these things. You need to do it now. I don't care if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, or your 90s. Do it while you can. What about informing the doctors of your changes of your desires? What happens when one of your family members that was taking care of you is now on the outs? Well, you need to make sure that you update those forms. Isn't it great that you gave this great power of attorney to your second wife and you're now on your fourth? You laugh. I've seen it. It's not something that is a joke, and yet it happens every day. I sat down and I was meeting with somebody over here, and it was having this conversation, and I knew that he happened to work for the city. I knew the city provided life insurance. I knew that he went through a divorce about 2 years ago, so as a matter of a joke, and I really thought I was joking, saying, so Joe, did you ever sit down and update your life insurance over there? Or is your ex-wife still on that policy? And he sits down and his face almost hit the floor. I says, you got 24 hours to get over to the city to change your form, or I'm going to go over there and change it and make myself the beneficiary. I couldn't legally do that, but I wanted to get the point across, so I knew he had kids that he wanted to give it to also. We have our living wills. Look at these great little categories. I hereby, if I have a terminal condition, an end-stage condition, or I'm in a persistent vegetative state. There are these different forms, and we have to check the boxes of what we want to have done. But realize that those are not the only states. Many of these forms have the ability to sit down and actually add in and modify. What is it that I want? What is it that I do not want? Express it and put it in writing. You may hate thinking about it, but we all need to think about it. How did I find out about these forms? I was practicing law for about 6 seconds. And I'm sitting there starting at the firm. And fortunately, I was at one of these large firms, and I had somebody call in and sit down and like introducing herself to me. And we're going over all these things, and I'm saying, this person, I felt like I was going through the Spanish Inquisition, is asking me more questions than everything, and just saying, do I really want to answer these questions? Why is this person asking me all these questions? To find out afterwards, when she explains to me afterwards, saying, okay, well, I need for you and your wife to come back in here, and we're going to sit down and we're going to fill out your wills. You just gave me all of the information for doing so. And that was her method of saying, you're never too young to sit down and start taking care of and expressing your wishes. I had a living will form, a healthcare surrogate form, and a will done when I was in my, mid-20s at that time. I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was when I became a lawyer. You're never too early, you're never too late, unless you're no longer capable of making those decisions. And having those decisions made at a time when you're really not ready to make them is not the best time. Having yourself end up in a state and your kids not being able to get into your bank accounts, not being able to pay your bills, or having your close friend or whoever it is you give the power to, next thing you know, your house ends up in foreclosure, they can't do any of these things, they got to sit down and open up an estate and do all these other things, or worse, have a guardianship appointed over you. Because there's only two ways to get power over somebody when they're not capable of doing it anymore. One is they die and they open an estate, or two, they have to have a court-appointed guardianship appointed over you. It's timely, it's costly, and it's unnecessary. Who makes the money? The lawyer. I don't want to fault my profession, but we all relatively do okay. We don't need to sit down and start making money off of you for something that can be created within an hour inside a lawyer's office for a couple $100, where you can go online and get some of these forms and do them yourself for free and save yourself and your family a whole bunch of aggravation. So, we all learned about healthcare surrogates. Depending upon where you came from, you may have heard of it also called as a healthcare proxy. It is, in my opinion, the most of all the forms, the most important. Why? Because this is only giving somebody the decision to make a healthcare decision over you. They can pretty much make every decision over you pertaining to your health. And guess what? They have no control over your money. It is an underutilized form. If all you want somebody to do is be able to take care of filling in for you when you're not capable of making a medical decision, let that person just get that power. You don't need a durable power of attorney that also gives them the ability to go over to your bank accounts. We have 3 different types of durable powers of attorney. We can have one that's very limited. I use it all the time. So-and-so's out of town. They can't sign their closing documents and they're selling their property. I give a power of attorney to do just that and nothing else. I can create a custom one, which has just provisions. And we sit down, as I said, and we initial each one of the boxes. I'm giving you this power, this power, this power, and this power. Heck no, I'm not giving you that. Or we can create this little full coverage thing that gives everything. You also have ability of doing certain other things that I've done for some of my clients. They created this full-powered, great durable power of attorney form that gives the person the ability to do everything and anything. And guess what they did? They gave it to me to hold. And said, I want you to make sure that you only give this out in the event of X, Y, or Z. So you can actually have that form and have it put in what I'll call an escrow for somebody to hold for you. Not the best way of doing it, but at times it's a great way of doing it. In the case I can't do this or whatever else it is, I want the person to have the power, but I'm afraid for somebody to have that power now. I first tell them, you're probably using the wrong person if you can't give them that power now. Do you really want to give it to them later? But I can only do what I am told to do. I speak more than my mind far too frequently. I get involved in my clients' everything to the point that I laugh because I have certain clients that are saying, well, I pretty much feel like they don't go to the bathroom without calling me. And I have some of those clients I've been representing now for over 20 years. But you need to know who it is that you're giving your powers to, who it is that you're giving your rights to. You need to express your opinions to your family members. You need to make sure you choose the right person to do the right thing. And you need to make sure you do it now, not later. I hate talking about mortality, but guess what? We're born one day, we're already dying. Truth of the matter is, every day we have one less day that we're going to live. Not a nice concept, but it's true. Why are we going to sit down and delay things? Because we don't have the ability to turn back the clock. There's so many forms of estate planning that you all can do to avoid probate and things like that, which I'm not even going to get into for the purposes of this class. Sorry, I feel like I'm in a classroom again. But you need to sit down and do what it is now and not later. And take advantage of what you can do for free. Do your little Google search in here. I don't care who you are, what age you are right now. I think virtually everybody can handle the internet. If you put a Google search in for the Florida Bar, you can search through their website. Or if you put in Florida Bar Healthcare Surrogate, Florida Bar Living Will, you'll find those forms. And they're free. With that said, Stuart told me my time was up about 10 minutes ago, but I'm here for as many questions as you want. Rest assured, you can contact me here, outside of there. Stuart has all of my numbers. You can always contact me. You want to talk to me afterwards in private, you can do that. You want to talk here in public. Everything I understand is a hypothetical question, in which case we're not talking about reality of what's going on in your life and that child you want to forget about. So I had a question right up here in front.
Is it okay to say, or do I have to wait for a mic?
Got the mic coming your way right now, and if you can't hear anybody, I'll be glad to repeat the questions as we go along also.
I'm glad you remembered.
Thank you. If you created a power of attorney before the changes a couple of Octobers ago, are you okay, or do you have to do a new one now?
My personal opinion is they're still effective, but they probably don't comply with what you want. I have never, outside of a few lawyers that I know, actually seen the point where we have specific provisions that are required under the law now to actually be initialed and attested to. It's great for those few things. I believe that you should sit down and make sure you have your form customized so you actually go through all of these powers. And if you ever look through a real one that's been created by a law firm, there are multiple pages, and you want to sit down and actually go almost sentence by sentence saying yes power, no power, yes power, no power. And I think you're better off getting a new form executed that nobody's going to do, and nobody's going to sit down and say that's not what you meant. Nobody's going to contest in a court of law, or worse, and I hate saying this because Stuart made me go on a damn camera, which I can't stand doing. Well, I'll sit down and say, not all judges think the same way.
You have another one?
Anybody?
We got one back there, and then we have the doctor up here.
Patients first.
Thank you. I have two questions. My niece is my executor or executrix, whatever, and I have a will from years ago, and it's a New York will.
100% effective. A niece is allowed under Florida law.
Oh, okay, good, because I need a new one in Florida because it's years old.
But your niece will be allowed to be administering of your
Good.
estate in Florida, even if she doesn't live in Florida.
Okay, good, because she's a lawyer, so that's good. The other thing, you had mentioned something about a cousin and taking care of or helping in the home. If I was to have, I don't have any family member that can help in the home. If I should come to the point where I feel I, need more help. This cousin doesn't live in this country, and she wants to come over here. I mean, we have dual reasons, but it would be good for both of us.
I think that's something you would have to talk. I don't practice immigration law, but I think that would be a very valid reason to come over and say this is what is needed, and to go meet with an immigration attorney. And I would think that there should be some kind of a provision that would enable you to bring somebody into the country who is a true blood relative for taking care of those kind of needs.
All
So
right.
I can't really give you assistance, but I'm sure you can find an immigration attorney that can find it as being a valid reason to bring somebody in.
All right, thank you very much.
No problem.
By the way, this is the best portion of the programs for me. I get to lose weight running around. It's not working well, though.
It's doing pretty good.
Thank you.
In some states, there is a question about whether banks will accept powers of attorney. What's the policy in Florida?
What's going to happen if you have a power of attorney form that's going to be created, and I can tell you firsthand experience, I've gone through this before, is they're going to take the power of attorney form. They're not going to let you do anything at that point in time when you go to the bank. They're going to take a fax copy to their in-house counsel of the bank to see whether the form complies with the law. If the form complies with the law, the bank has no authorization to say no. So if it's a properly created power of attorney form, and they can attest to the fact that that person is still alive, because remember, a power of attorney lapses upon death, they will sit down and they will honor the power of attorney form, but it needs to be a form that is correctly drafted and complies with the law. We had a very bright lady over here before that talked the fact that the power of attorney's laws have changed, which is why I think everybody should get an updated form that complies with the current law, but they still should honor a form that was created, which was created at a time when it did comply with the law. But we have many people that are out there that will sit down and, I'll give an example that I talk about and I teach contracts at the university, where I sit down and say, it's great when we have this little powerful mechanism that's out there. It's all-knowing. It knows everything. It's Google. And they went onto Google and they got this form. And I have a client of mine, and this is a God's honest truth, that went to Google, a multimillionaire, but I feel he is as rich as he is because he's as cheap as he is. And he got this little form online called a promissory note, and he lent somebody money, but he didn't understand the wording on the note because it doesn't always talk in English. And the note was created to the point that he lent the person the money, but he was also obligated to pay the person the money. So the forms are there and they're great. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But it's like what I'll call a computer. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't do it right, you haven't accomplished anything. Yes?
I have a question. I think maybe you would prefer I ask you later in private. But just as soon as my husband passed away, I immediately made my will. And I knew what I wanted. I have 3 children, and the attorney that I've used lived down the road from us and grew up with the children. Knew that he knows us real well, and but I did not want it to go in probate, and I said it 3 times, and he wrote it up in probate. And finally, the 3rd time, I told him I do not want it to go through probate. And he said, well, what have you got against probate? And I could not answer the question properly at that time. But I called him up on the phone later. Not 1 time, not 2 times, but 3 times. And I said, John, I don't want my will in probate to go through probate. And each time he'd say, well, I'll have to check and see what your so-and-so, what that will do. I said, it won't do anything. I said, it'll be fine. It'll go right through the county process. 3 times, and I've given up on him. I hate to hurt his feelings, but I'm going to have to go to somebody else. and will I be able to do that? And then this one will be void.
A will, by nature, is created for probate.
Right.
That is the purpose of a will. It's to administer your estates after you pass away. That does not mean that you have to go through probate to administer an estate.
Yes.
Because you can create other things that can avoid probate, such as a trust. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different ways.
That's what I want.
That's lots of different ways to administer and take care of a person's wishes. Mm-hmm. My personal opinion is probate is not something to be scared of. It's not something to be afraid of.
Well,
but I still think if you wanted to accomplish what you want, what I would say you should do is have a trust created that takes care of 98% of your things. But you still need to have a will, because I'm sure there's going to be something that's going to be forgotten that you may need to sit down and still have administered through probate. So when I do things for my clients, I will create a trust if that's what they desire, but I will still have a will created, because there's things I will not allow to go into a trust. People say, why don't you want everything going in a trust? Well, if you take all of your assets and you put it into a trust, and then you take your car and you put your car in the trust, then you get involved in an automobile accident and you hit and kill somebody, the person that owns the car is the trust, and now your trust is liable for all the things that happened from that car accident.
Well, that's...
So there's always going to be something that's out there, but it might be something that we can call opening up what we call a mini estate. just to take care of a car or something that's there where you don't need to go through full-blown probate. But you can talk to your lawyer and say, well, I'd like to create a trust or something like that, and that might help you as well.
All right.
The doctor had a question also, I know.
Yeah, well, we're going to take 2 more questions from patients, and then we'll let the doctor ask a question. Suspense is killing him, I know, and all of you.
Is a power of attorney from another jurisdiction, assuming it's proper in that jurisdiction, recognized in Florida?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And we have one all the way over here, Stuart. You've skipped this side of the room, I know.
I know.
He's coming your way right now. We're making him run. Pick up the pace, Stuart.
I can yell.
We want to make sure it gets on the recording.
Okay. This is very simple. If you have a bank account and you've designated an ITF, does the ITF supersede anything else?
It would actually supersede your will.
It would supersede the will. So in other words, the person could just present the death certificate and the funds would automatically...
You have ITFs and you also have what's called POD, paid upon death clause, that you can sit down and you can use for many of your assets. You can have your 401k that designates beneficiaries. There are a lot of different things that you can do that take money out of your estate without the need for having to go through probate. It's a long process. If you go to an attorney that specializes in the area of that, there's many ways that you can do different things.
And now the question that many of you might be waiting to hear.
How does the Florida law covers FMLA as well as decision-making process when there's nothing in writing for same-sex partners?
Understand that federal law has not yet gotten involved in any of those issues. That all turns on state law. The state of Florida is not what I will call a progressive state in that field. So what do we do on that situation? We make it very simple. If you have a same-sex couple or even just close friends, if you sit down and you take care of that healthcare surrogate or power of attorney forms, you can sit down and say, I don't care what the law says. Here's a document that gives me the right. So I tell all of my clients that are involved in those type of a relationship, if you do what you're supposed to do, it doesn't matter that this is your spouse or significant other or whoever. Create the form and you now have the right. Now the only problem you might have is if you sit down and you give those rights is you may sit down and have some family members that may not, let's say, accept that person, that may try to interject themselves into things. And that's where it's going to fall upon the doctor to say, I'm honoring the written document more than the family relationship.
So those were all great questions, and I want to thank you, and I want to thank Craig Dorne for coming all the way up from Miami today, or last night, to come and speak with you all. We're going to take just a quick few moments, get the doctor situated up here, get his PowerPoint program working. In the meantime, we have a few people that need to come into the room, and we'll be right back with you.
And if you have any questions, I'm outside ready to answer.
And yes, Craig's available. If anybody has questions, personal questions, you want to go outside and speak with him, please do. All right, everybody, ready to get started again? Yay, right. So all personal questions, if you have any for the attorney, please take them outside into the hallway. Let's get started because the doctor's got a lot to discuss with all of you, something that I know that many of you are going to be learning from here today. And if you're not learning, well, I guess you didn't want to learn. All right? But regardless, remember, please hold all questions for him until after he does his presentation. Okay? And then after all that is done, then we'll get into why you really came, those raffles. Okay? Thank you. You're up.
So I really appreciate Stuart's invitation to be here today. Thanks all of you for coming to this program. I'm really excited about the program this morning or this afternoon already because usually when we come to these programs as patients, we hear about particular drugs, particular medications, and we're very limited as doctors when we present those programs about what can we talk about. But today I'm going to give you a general outlook of multiple sclerosis. We're going to start with a summary of some new concepts on pathophysiology. I'll be quick. I'm going to be covering some issues about diagnosis and issues on the diagnosis. We'll cover all the medications for MS briefly, but hopefully I'll give you the insights that you need to understand the condition, have a broader view of the condition. I'll be very quick I'm going to be presenting a lot of data, but there's no test at the end. So if you miss something, if some parts are over your head, don't worry about it. You'll caught up with me, and at the end, hopefully, you'll get the information that you will need. I always look forward for the question and answer section, and actually some people brought me already some excellent questions that I'll make sure I'll answer at the end, and let's go on with the program. I think it's important to let you know that MS is a changing disease. The concepts on MS, the treatment of it are changing all the time. The data is changing. And some of the things that I may tell you today, I may tell you something different next year or next month. Always remember to discuss with your doctor if you hear what sounds like an advice from me regarding your case that is not what you understand. Everybody is different. Every patient is different. Everybody responds different. I think it's important also for you to know that I am affiliated to a number of pharmaceutical companies that I do speaker programs for them, and I have done some research work. And those are Pfizer, Biogen, Teva, and Novartis. All of them put out products for multiple sclerosis. And obviously, the company is always trying to influence us in prescribing the product. I like to think that I try to stay away from too much influence and make my own opinions about them. But I think it's important for you to know that every doctor that talks to you can potentially be influenced by what they hear in the pharmaceutical companies. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The slides that I have for this conference, most of them I made myself. Some of them I made through the years, copying pictures from book and from the internet and from pharmaceutical company presentations. Some of them you'll see. You'll hopefully will enjoy them. What is MS? You know, it's something that honestly we're still defining. We know that there's some autoimmune processes. We know that there's some inflammatory processes that go in multiple sclerosis. We know that a lot of people fall into what's called a neurodegenerative process. So we know a lot about MS. We're learning a lot about MS. There's a lot of research done on it, but it's still one of the most intriguing diseases in medicine. Certainly it is for neurology. Worldwide incidence, about 0.1%, about 400,000 people plus. In the US, it often starts between ages 20 and 40, although it can start later. It can start earlier, but that's the average. Most of the patients start in their youth years, for women in their reproductive years. There's an increased risk of MS among first-degree relatives, and we'll talk a little bit more about genetics of MS. But I think that's a good number to remember. I mean, if you have MS and you worry about what's going to be the risk to my brother, to my daughter, to my son, you know, for the most, 1 to 3% increased risk for them, which is not that high, which is a good thing. Condition can be highly variable and unpredictable. I think you all know about that. Interestingly enough, we have known for a long time that MS has a higher incidence in the Northern European population, and Canada and North America more than in more climate templates. That's been studied through the years. We think that vitamin D plays a big role on it, and we'll cover more about vitamin D. Some data about the natural history of multiple sclerosis. You don't have to learn this number, but just to give you an overall idea of it. Most patients start with a relapsing remitting form, meaning attacks, exacerbation, flare-ups that come and go, sometimes recovering completely, sometimes leaving some deficit. But as time goes by, many of those progress to a secondary progressive form of MS, and I know you're hopefully familiar with those concepts. You know, people always ask us what to expect about MS, particularly when they start on the condition, and it's always hard to know because everybody's different. But, oh, here we go. But in average, at the beginning, people have 0.4 to 1 attacks per year. So 1 attack every 2 years, 1 attack a year, that's a general average. Some people do much better, some people do much worse. But I think that's a good number that we often tell our patients when they come in initially. It depends on many factors. How bad is the MRI? You know, what's your age? What's your sex? The attacks tend to be higher on the first few years. And this is an important point, particularly for those of you that are newly diagnosed or have been recently diagnosed, because a lot of times at the beginning of the diagnosis, people question the need for treatment. Do I really need to be on something for the rest of my life? Do I really need to be taking a pill that affects my immune system or using an injection every day? But it's important to know that this condition often turns progressive. That is very active, often the first few years. So it's important to treat early, and I think you'll hear the same thing from any speaker that you hear talking about this issue. Cognitive impairment, memory problem, difficulty with memory concentration, mental abilities do tend to be affected in many patients as time goes by. Up to 50% in 10 years have some affection of cognition. There are things to do about that, but and we'll go over that. How do we know how a particular patient is going to do? I wish we knew for sure with every patient, and we really don't know. But this is an interesting table about prognostic factors. How can we tell? If you look at the things that are unfavorable, meaning things that make it tougher for you, okay, in terms of how are you going to do, higher attack rate. If you start having many exacerbations, that's never a good sign. Short interval between one and another attack, lack of recovery from a particular attack, older age of onset. And this is interesting because, if I'm going to have MS, I'd rather develop it later on in life so I can be healthier the younger years. But often when people develop MS later in life, the condition tends to be a little bit more progressive than for people that develop it earlier in life. And again, that's a good rule of thumb. That's not always that way, but it's an important concept to understand. Males often tend to do a little bit worse. Again, another rule of thumb, but definitely true. If you develop disability early, if you have cerebral symptoms, those conditions tend to carry a little bit worse prognostic rate. There's a lot of challenging concepts of MS. And I've done a lot of reading about multiple sclerosis. I definitely don't know everything about it. I still feel that when I learn something new and interesting, that brings more questions about the condition. But we consider MS a white matter disease. When people talk about MS, it's like, okay, this is a disease of white matter. But now we know that the gray matter is heavily involved in multiple sclerosis as well. So that traditional concept of white matter only, we know is not quite true. Is it an autoimmune disease? Well, we know there's some autoimmune factors. What about infections and MS? We know a number of infections tend to predispose for MS. Is it a degenerative disease? Well, we know some people go into degeneration of nerve cells. There's some vascular factors, or all of the above. So it is a very complex disease that we think we know a lot about it, but there's a lot that we're still understanding about the condition. One of the key questions about MS is it really one disease? And I think most of us consider MS a group of diseases that present with some similar symptoms, and we can go over that a little bit later if we have time. MS can occur in children. The youngest report case is 2 years old. Up to 4 to 5% of cases can occur in childhood years. Interestingly enough, these young people that have multiple sclerosis, these girls actually don't have MS. Those are my 2 daughters when they were younger. But I couldn't resist putting this picture in. They know I'm showing this one today. They have a higher incidence of antibody-mediated disease. They have more frequent relapses, but they tend to be of short duration. And I'm pointing this out because that's an age in which your body is producing a lot of myelin. The younger the brain, the bigger the capacity to heal. So it's a little bit of a different disease in childhood than it is in adult in some ways. I've always been intrigued by the environmental causes of MS, and I think everybody that have MS wonder, what about the toxins? What about the infection? What about the vaccine that I have? What about different factors? And there's a number of factors that I think are important to mention today. Epstein-Barr Virus is a common infection that affects us. Many of us have been exposed to that virus. An affection in early life, although not necessary for MS development, predisposes for MS. Smoking, can potentially increase the risk of MS. And as I always say on my lectures on MS, if you're still smoking, you should stop. You're adding insult to injury. You know, MS affects the white matter. Smoking disease affects blood vessels that go to the white matter predominantly. So smoking is not a good thing to do. Find another hobby. Vitamin D is an environmental factor that has become really important. And this is not like a new kid on the block. Like, last 10 years they were recommending ginkgo biloba for the memory, and then they were recommending antioxidants, and now, you know, vitamin D is the vitamin of choice. Well, there's a lot of studies that support that if you have low vitamin D, you have increased risk of developing MS. If you already have MS and your vitamin D is low, your condition will be more progressive or more severe. They have done some animal studies on vitamin D. I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah, there's my slide. So there's some studies done with animal studies that are predisposed to develop an experimental form of multiple sclerosis. And if you treat these animals with high-dose vitamin D, and then you expose them to the agents that can activate the disease, they tend to do better. So the point is, if you haven't taken it already, you need to have your vitamin D levels checked. You should. Some people would say, just go ahead and take some vitamin D. I mean, if you don't want to have your vitamin D level checked, I'm not sure why. Start taking 1,000 units of vitamin D. If your levels are low, you should be treated, but taking vitamin D is an important consideration and in the treatment of patients with multiple sclerosis. So I hope you got the point if you're not on vitamin D already. And I don't sell vitamin D, by the way. I don't want to build up a lot of complex science to you, but to me, some of the more interesting studies, there's this protein is called interleukin. These are proteins that communicate some white blood cells with another and give them signals: attack, withdraw, hit on, no, don't attack this one, this is part of ours. So the interleukins help communicate one cell's white blood cells to another. And this particular interleukin-7 is a powerful pro-inflammatory, and it gets decreased with vitamin D. So there's a lot of experimental, animal, scientific, human data about the importance of taking vitamin D. I think we got enough of vitamin D there. And dietary factors are important. We'll get back into that. You have probably, some of the people here that have been my patients or have heard me in talks, you have probably heard from me already. You need to lose weight, you need to get into a diet, you need to limit your carbohydrates. And particularly, some carbohydrates have some proteins called lectins, and there's some studies showing that they can exacerbate immune systems. But interestingly enough, in patients that have a multiple sclerosis, there's been some new data showing that salt intake can make the condition worse. Every year, the neurology journals give us information about, okay, what were the best studies of the past year? What were the best studies of 2013 on multiple sclerosis? Well, I was reading an article this year about the best studies on our field of neurology through 2013. And you know what was the best study on MS and the best data new that came from multiple sclerosis? The effect of salt on experimental forms of multiple sclerosis. So the point here is, cut down the salt. It's going to help your blood pressure, but it can potentially help the MS. We don't know exactly how much is good enough. How much can you take? I mean, I don't want you to be miserable eating with no taste on your food, but be prudent with your with your salt, because there's information coming out that it can make you more sensitive to MS progression and MS attacks. Okay? So, low salt and low carbohydrate. I think the cardiologists will like this talk. I want to take a few minutes to talk about infections and multiple sclerosis, and I have to say, not because this is of tremendous clinical interest to most of you, but I'm really interested in this because it's very interesting data. The possible association of MS and its relationship to infectious causes was raised since the 1800s. It is known that infections with several organisms do seem to cause increased risk for developing of multiple sclerosis. That include, as I already mentioned, Epstein-Barr virus, herpes, influenza, measles, papilloma, and many others. So it seemed like certain infections predispose to MS. Actually, how many of you had spinal taps before your diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, okay? So one of the things that we look on the spinal tap, and they're really important, we don't have to do them in everybody, but sometimes we have to do them. One of the things we look is something called the oligoclonal bands. And those are immunoglobulins, special proteins on the spinal fluid. Well, people have looked at those immunoglobulins, and there's no specific target for those immunoglobulins on the central nervous system, but those immunoglobulins are against this type of viruses and bacteria. So we know that infections play a key role, and our relationship with our flora play a key role in the development of MS and other autoimmune diseases. I'll show you some interesting examples now. There was a study done in 2011, a couple of years ago, in which they took these little rats that had some genetic deficiencies predisposed to develop experimental allergic encephalomyelitis, which is kind of an experimental animal form of MS. It's not identical to the human MS, but somewhat similar. So they raised these animals in sterile environment. Again, these animals were genetically predisposed to develop it, and none of them show any signs of the illness. But when her gastrointestinal tract was populated with the normal flora, all of the mice became affected. So we know that the intestinal flora, according to experimental data, and that data is growing, potentially have an impact on the development of MS, the severity and the acuity of it. I love this slide, and this is the last scientific infectious disease slide that I'm going to be presenting, but hopefully give you a little bit of insight, because I have the feeling that in the next few years, and that may be 5, 10, 20, 30 years, we're going to be manipulating the type of organisms that you have, and maybe giving you some infections or bacteria to counteract some of the conditions. So this is not something that we're using now, but if you look at these two tables, the one on the left measures from 1950 to the year 2000 the incidence of infectious disease. We have done a great job controlling infectious disease in the population. If you look at hepatitis, look how much has it come down, the incidence. Rheumatic fever, boom. Tuberculosis, still we see a lot of it, but have decreased significantly. Measles, mumps. I mean, we've been beating those infectious diseases with vaccination programs and antibiotics, and that's a great thing. But interestingly enough, when you look at the same years from 1950 to the year 2000, and you look at the risk of autoimmune diseases, they have been increasing. Look at type 1 diabetes, asthma, look at this curve, Crohn's disease, and look at multiple sclerosis coming over here. So it seems like exposure to microorganisms when we're young, it helps us develop some kind of immune tolerance that help us limit the autoimmune diseases. Now that we're cleaner in a more sterile environment, it seems like that has caused an increased risk of autoimmune diseases. So anyway, there's some studies now going on in the US as well as in Mexico, and I heard that in Europe, but I haven't looked at the studies, taking patients and giving them eggs of some parasites, okay, to develop some immune tolerance and decrease the sensitivity of multiple sclerosis. Very interesting data. If any of you is interested, we can talk on the question and answering section or later on. Mitochondria is critical in MS. Many of you have heard about the chronic cerebrovascular insufficiency. This is one of those new kids on the block that came out a few years ago. There were some studies, for those of you that don't know what this is, there were some studies done in Italy in which the doctor that did the studies, he suggested that some blockage on the jugular arteries, the jugular veins, which are the blood vessels that drain the blood from the brain, if they were blocked, they would cause an increased pressure of blood back up in the brain, increasing the risk of MS. And they started doing this procedure called the liberating procedure to open those vessels with angioplasty. But the bottom line, and I have had a couple of patients that have undergone this procedure, the bottom line is that back in a couple of years ago, in May of 2012, the FDA issued a warning about the risk of this procedure, and right now, the best data that we have is that this procedure does not seem to be useful for treatment of multiple sclerosis. What about genetics and MS? I just want to mention a couple of important points. There are like 50 genes and a lot of gene abnormality and chromosomal abnormalities that increase the risk of MS. There's not one MS gene that if you have it, you're going to have the disease. Actually, if you have a twin brother or sister that have multiple sclerosis, the twin have only about a 30% chance of having MS. So we know it's not all genetics. We know that there's environmental factors. Those, as you already have heard, vitamin D, infections, and possibly others. And remember, if you have MS, first degree, family members will have a 1 to 3% increased risk of multiple sclerosis. So we know that some people have some genetic predisposition for multiple sclerosis. There may be, likely, in many or all patients, we don't know, some infectious agents that also, along with some environmental factors, like vitamin D or possibly others, cause the abnormal immunological response that lead to multiple sclerosis. How to make a diagnosis of MS? You know, history is critical, physical examination is critical, and MRI, you know, we know is the most sensitive test to help us diagnose and help us monitor the condition. An MRI, to make it simple, it's a water distribution map of the brain. You know, there's no X-ray on MRI. It's just a magnet, and it gives us very good information on the brain and on the fluid on the brain, on the blood vessels on the brain. It's the best study we have. It's a great study. I'm still impressed by the findings that we see on it. It's 5 to 10 times more sensitive to MS activity than clinical observation. And the rule of thumb is that for every 6 lesions that you have in the brain on the MRI, you're going to have about 1 attack. So there's a lot of changes that go on in the brain that often we can detect on MRI that we don't see clinically. And that's why in the past years, I was one that was fairly conservative, checking MRIs on patients. If a patient was stable and not progressing, I would often wait a few years before checking another MRI. And now we're getting a little bit more aggressive with the new medication, with the new treatment, and knowing that if we don't treat a patient aggressively and they're progressing in their MRI, you know, they can get worse before we notice. So there's a lot of information about it that we can get. Spinal Taps sometimes is needed, sometimes it's not. It can give us some useful information in cases in doubt, or there's some situations in which we need to do a Spinal Tap to help us with the diagnosis. And the physical examination. Physical examination is really important, and you know, every once in a while, and you know, I have patients that come to my office for a follow-up, and I may just talk to them or may just check her heart and not examine them. But if your doctor, including myself, is not checking you consistently when you come to the offices, you may want to get another doctor. I mean, we can get a lot of information from a physical examination, from a detailed history. So if your doctor doesn't take the time with you, you know what you're getting. There's a lot of misdiagnosis of MS, and before MRIs, we used to see a lot of people that have a lot of non-specific symptoms diagnosed as MS. Then with the MRI, you know, we could tell many of those if they really have MS or not, but there's still a lot of misdiagnosis. Particularly, you know, a lot of patients presenting above 50 with multiple sclerosis, that's an age in which we start seeing some damage to the small vessels of the brain, to the white matter, from circulation problem, from little strokes, and it can be very confusing with MS. So what kind of rules do we use how can we tell if a patient that I'm seeing for the first time do have MS or not? And sometimes we don't know for sure, but most patients with MS will have some kind of abnormal findings on examination, so a normal examination doesn't rule out MS. I mean, I wish you all have normal examination, but if a patient that have MS for a long time, having a lot of symptoms, have a normal exam, could be that they don't have MS. If the onset is before age 10 or after age 55, that's unusual. If the course is progressive, starting before age 35, you know, that's a little bit unusual. And there's a number of atypical features. Severe headaches, hearing loss, uveitis, seizures. They don't rule out that you have MS, but they often can indicate some other processes. Let's go to treatment. I think that's what we came here for, to hear about some of the new options availability, how to change, if what I'm doing is correct. So we know that for a number of years, MS organizations have suggested that once the diagnosis is made, we should start treatment or strongly consider starting treatment. There's many drugs in the market. There's now 10 drugs approved, and we'll go over most of them. And there's a lot of new research and a lot of new medicines that are under evaluation for MS. So things are looking positive. We still don't have a cure, but certainly we have far more options to treat our patients than we had before. The first medicine that was approved for multiple sclerosis was the interferons. So there's a number of them: Avonex, Rebif, Betaseron. These are very interesting medicine. We have known for a long time that patients with MS tend to have low levels of interferons. Again, interferons are proteins that the cells use to communicate with each other. And these cells, they work very interestingly. They decrease activation of T cells. You know, some of the activated T cells can make the condition worse or can cause the condition. They keep them from proliferating. They keep them from coming into the central nervous system. So there's a lot of mechanisms of action for which these medicines are used and are really helpful. So interferon inhibits activation, prevents proliferation, block entrance of cells to the central nervous system. They have the limitations, like any other drug for MS. And if you look at the main MS drug, MS beta interferons, you're going to see that we have Betaseron and Extavia. That's basically the same product, made by different companies. Avonex, which is the intramuscular once a week. Rebif is the subcutaneous injection 3 times a week. And the data on efficacy is very similar, 29 to 34%. Rebif may be a little bit better in the efficacy on the studies than some of the others. But then there's a key important factor in patients that are using interferon, and is that many of them will develop antibodies against the medicine. And this is something that doctors are not checking often and not paying a lot of attention to. But if you're taking Betaseron, it's about a 44% chance that you may develop neutralizing antibodies, meaning your medicine is probably not helping any or not doing too much. Avonex, Rebif, 23%. Avonex, which is the once a week, is only 6%. So, you know, I always talk to the companies that make this. It's like, well, Rebif may sound a little bit better the first couple of years, but, you know, what the effect of these neutralizing antibodies will have on the condition later on is important to know. And these are just things important for us as physicians to know when we're seeing patients coming back with their drugs for analysis of their drug treatment. I think most of you are familiar with Copaxone, glatimer acetate. I'm not going to talk about what exactly it does. It's an interesting drug as well. The main side effect, our injection site reaction, is a very safe product. And I think most of us look at Copaxone as probably the safer drug. Now, some people argue, well, it may be one of the milder drugs, but it's definitely the safer drug. So it is a good option for many patients. And since earlier this year, the medicine came on a different preparation that is a 3 times a week form. So people with Copaxone are using the injection once a day. Now there's a new preparation 3 times a week that I think it's probably a good idea for most patients, at least to consider the change. And again, it's a very safe product. We don't have to worry as doctors when we have patients on Copaxone. We don't have to be thinking, okay, what about the liver? What about the kidneys? I mean, what about the cell blood count? It doesn't have much problem. We don't have to do any blood monitors. So it's a simple medicine to use, effective, one of them probably milder in terms of strength, but one of the safer medicines. Good option to consider for young females that want to get pregnant. To me, that's the drug of choice there. Mitosandron, some of you may have used it. It's a medicine that was approved several years ago for progressive cases. And all I'm going to say about it is here on this last line. It has some cardiac toxicity. It can cut down, decrease the white blood cell count. And the side effects have been underestimated or were underestimated in the initial studies. With the new drugs that we have now for MS, we're not using this medicine that much. I have used it a couple of times. I couldn't tell that it helped. I mean, it's still an option for progressive cases. What about Tysabri? You know, Tysabri came out in 2006. When it came out to the market, we were all super excited about it because the data on Tysabri was better than any of the previous medicines that we have. The efficacy on controlling MRI, the efficacy on controlling progression was absolutely wonderful. So it came out to the market. Doctors started prescribing like crazy, and within 6 months, we have a number of cases of PML. Progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy is an infection of a virus into the brain that causes progressive intractable damage to the brain. So the medicine came out off the market, came back to the market. We started using it cautiously, and interestingly enough, now we have far better ways to monitor our patients on Tysabri to significantly decrease the possibility of developing PML. So this is a medicine that 2-3 years ago, doctors that don't do a lot of multiple sclerosis were not using at all. And I think most of us are taking a second look at it because it is a powerful agent. It's very interesting because it blocks, what it does is that it blocks, these are white blood cells, the purple things here, white blood cells. This is the blood vessel in red, and that's the brain over here. So those white blood cells, some of them have these receptors that kind of attach to the brain tissue and enter inside the brain. And Tysabri blocks those. So it blocks activated cells from entering the brain, causing tremendous efficacy on limiting the progression of the disease, the number of attacks. But if this bad virus gets into the brain, then hell broke loose. So, brief summary slide on it. It can cause some infusion reaction, including anxiety, fatigue, pharyngitis, congestion, and some swelling. Allergic reactions, about 4%, so it's not that bad. About 1% can have a serious allergic reaction. Neutralizing antibodies, meaning developing immunity against the medicine, so it wouldn't work. It only happened in about 6%, so that's low. And if you don't have the JC virus in your system, you won't have the disease. Now you have to understand that every year, if we're JC virus negative, meaning if we don't have the virus in our system, we have ways to test for that. If we don't have it, every year we have about a 2 to 3% chance of becoming infected with it. So we have to monitor at least every 6 months on patients taking this medication to see if they got the JC virus and then consider what to do. And there's some new data coming out now on how to stratify the risk. It's becoming an easier medicine to use. And before, I used to put patients on Tysabri. I would use it for 2 years, and then you're out. And then now, many patients were keeping them longer. So what about, let me see if I can turn down these lights. Hey, that's better. So in the last 3 years, we start getting finally some oral drugs for multiple sclerosis. You know, for a long time we've been talking about, you know, what about a pill? If they're a pill, do we have to inject myself? And now we have 3 different oral pills for MS. So, you know, is this the era of the oral treatment? Does everybody should be on the oral treatment or no? Are they better than the medicines we have? And those are questions that we are still analyzing. We're learning about them, we're trying to understand, and obviously every patient is different. But we're looking serious about these drugs. The first one that came was Gilenya or fingolimod. It came out from a fungi, from an fungi. It reduces, sorry. I'm going the wrong way. There we go. It causes a 45% reduction in the number of attacks versus placebo. This data, I mean, it's hard to compare studies with studies, but it's a little bit better than with some of the older medicines. It reduced the number of gadolinium-enhancing lesion. It was approved about 3 years ago. It can cause a number of problems, including diarrhea, macular edema, cardiac problems, including low heart rate is the big one with the infusion. It will decrease the white blood cell count, and that's an important thing that we have to monitor carefully. I think it's important to mention, because even some doctors are not really aware of this, but most of your white blood cells, most of your lymphocytes, they're in your lymph nodes. Okay, you know that white blood cells, just like the red blood cells, they're producing the bone marrow. The white blood cells go into the circulation, and they go to the lymph nodes. So the lymph nodes are like the training camp for these white blood cells. And most of them are there, and only about 1 to 2% of the total lymphocytes are in the blood. And that's what's decreased on fingolimod. So we doctors have been wondering a long time, why don't these people have more infections? If we're cutting down the white blood cell that much, and it's because we're cutting down the white blood cells on the blood, on the circulation, but still the patient is keeping the main defense inside the body, which is the white blood cells in the lymphocytes. And actually, this year, end of last year, beginning of this year, we got some data on fingolimod, and the risk of infection doesn't seem to be worse than the initial study. So I think most of the people that were very concerned about the use of it have become a little bit more comfortable with its use. Advantages: it's an oral tablet. Studies have shown benefit in many patient subgroups, meaning female, males, early onset, late onset. If you had side effects or problems with other medicine changing to it, you still can get a positive response. It's been over 3 years in use without any new surprises in terms of side effects. I think the difficulties, it's a little bit harder to manage for us, because whenever we see patients on fingolimod, we have to check the liver and check the white blood cell count and have there been any infection. It takes a little bit longer from us. It can cause a number of other problems. It takes longer to get the patient ready for it. But it's a very good option, particularly for patients that are progressing, having side effects to other medications. And it's not that hard to monitor once you start doing it regularly. Like many of the new medicines, the risk of long-term side effects are still unknown. So we don't know what's going to happen with these patients 5-10 years down the road. Techfidera, or dimethylfumadate, very interesting drug. I think most of us neurologists are taking a good look at this drug. It's an anti-inflammatory medicine that has been used in Germany for years to treat psoriasis. So we feel a little bit more comfortable because we know a brother or sister of this medicine has been in the market already for a long time. It's not a brand new, totally new drug. There's some studies that have shown efficacy. The mechanism in which it works is mainly like an antioxidant, very interesting mechanism. We're still learning how is it that it works. The MRI data caused about 85% reduction in lesions in T2, 90% in the gadolinium-enhanced lesion, 55% decrease in relapse rates. Powerful data. This is a good, strong medicine that we're definitely taking a strong look at it. It's one of the new drugs. It's been in the market for a year. The most frequent side effects were temporary flushing, a warm feeling, and gastrointestinal symptoms, including nausea, diarrhea, itching, cramping, and vomiting. Some patients cannot tolerate the medicine. Usually we tell them, give it some time. Give it some time. Those first few weeks are the toughest one, but if you can go through it, it seems to be a safe medicine. But not everybody can take it. It can cause a little bit of a decreased white blood cell count, increase the eosinophil. Liver function tests have been increased in a few patients, but there's no reports of malignancy, malignant neoplasms or cancers, or opportunistic infections. So safe medicine that for patients that tolerate it, seems like a good option. We're kind of learning how to use it and looking at it more cautiously and seriously. Aubagio, Terriflunamide, is another of the newer drugs. It's the last one that have come. It's been almost a year since it got approved. It's another pill. 2 dosages, but 14 milligrams a day is the effective dose. People on this medicine, this is what they should be using. It may be, not as strong as the other pills. It may be, the company will tell you, the patients that were in our studies were harder patients, were tougher patients, were more severe patients, and it is true. But the data showed that it may not be as powerful. So we're still, as physicians, trying to look at their data and how effective it is and how does it compare to the others. People get concerned about the hair loss. What it causes is a thinning on the hair. About 10% of people get it. It's usually transient. And the hair usually comes back within a year. Nausea, abnormal liver function test, diarrhea. And you can see that this nausea, diarrhea, abnormal liver function tests, they seem to be present in all of these medicines. It's a category X, meaning you shouldn't use it on pregnancy or women that are expecting to get pregnant. It has mild effect on disability. And overall, to me, the summary of it is that it's a well-tolerated medicine. It's fairly easy to use for patients and for doctors to monitor. It's a good choice, particularly after reproductive years. So you don't want to get pregnant on this, so if you're in that stage of your life, this may not be the best choice for you. It's a complex table. We're going to go quickly over it. I'm running late. But anyway, showing comparison data that we never see as doctors or you as patients on the different drugs. Relapse rate decrease, 68% on the Tysabri, fingolimod 54%. This is Aubagio, Terriflunamide 31%. This is Techfidera. So, I mean, we have ways and we have data to our disposal to compare the different drugs and see the efficacy of it. And that's a good table on that. What about patients that don't respond well? I mean, when do you switch medicine? When do you consider? I mean, most doctors will tell you that you want to take the medicine for 6 months to a year. I mean, if I start you on a medicine and 3 months from now you have an attack, does that mean that you're a failure to the medicine? Well, I mean, not necessarily. But, that becomes tough when you start somebody on a medicine and they start having attacks or progression quick. Personally, I tend to change them right away. I don't wait. They recommended 6 to 12 months. Worsening or fluctuating symptoms. If you're having frequent attacks, if you're having significant progression of symptoms, that's the time that you need to take a look at the medicine that you're using with your doctors to consider change. Not that there's going to be other medicine that is going to take care of your case, because the condition tends to be progressive. But certainly it's a good time when we see some progression to take a second look at whatever treatment we're doing. Side effects, before when we have only beta interferons and Copaxone, we tell the patient, hey, you take one or take the other, they both have side effects. If you're having side effects, you should take them anyway. But now with more options, it become a lot of a patient preference, One of the questions that has been coming out in neurology is, well, what about if a patient tells you, I know I'm doing fine, I'm stable on my medicine, but I'm tired of my injections, should I change? And is it the patient's choice? And from my point of view, I mean, it's your choice. You want to make sure that you discuss it with your doctor. My rule of thumb, if you're doing fine on what you're doing and you're tolerating it, don't change, okay? But patient needle fatigue is a factor that we have to take into consideration in some patients that want to change. I'm not suggesting that everybody should change. I think the injectables are good options for many. We've been looking for a long time for what's called the biomarkers, meaning blood tests that will tell us, or MRI findings that will tell us which patient is going to respond to what drug. But we don't have that yet. But it's getting better. I mean, my wife had breast cancer last year, okay? So they did a biopsy. They look at some genetic studies on the breast cancer tissue, and they told her, hey, based on the genetic makeup of your case, you're going to be a better responsive to this particular treatment. It's going to get the point that we can do that in MS, that we can do maybe some spinal fluid analysis, maybe a blood test, and help us with the decision on what medicine to use. But right now, it's a toss coin. It's having your doctor, making the best choice with you about what medicines are going to be the best. A little flow chart, and this is it's an interesting chart because we don't see this often. What about if you're having an aggressive disease, either from the onset or as the condition progresses? If your disease is becoming aggressive, what to do? And again, not everybody is the same. This may not be for everybody, but this gives us a good idea of what are the options that we doctors are thinking. So if you're having a very aggressive disease, you should have the JC virus check. Again, that's the one that can cause PML if you're on Tysabri. If it's negative, consider natalizumab or Tysabri. So, I mean, according to this flow chart, that's a good option to consider for progressive disease. If you're JC virus positive, in some cases you may still consider it, but you may want to look into the fingolimod or Gilenya or the BG12 or Techfidera. Those are oral medicines, strong data, doing poor on the platform therapies. I mean, that's what we're looking at what to do. If you're not having an aggressive disease, what are the safest drug? I think most people consider, glatimer acetate or Copaxone, as I mentioned before, one of the safest medicines. Interferons, overall, they're fairly safe too, and obviously we've been using them for a long time, so we know what to expect exactly, almost exactly. If you're thinking of getting pregnant, Copaxone is going to be the choice for you. If you definitely don't want an injection, then you go over to the new medicines. So treatment decisions that, there are many factors when we decide to change treatment. It is not a simple thing. I mean, I have some patients that come over and tell me, I want to change. So what do you want to change? Well, I'm tired of the injections, all right? This medicine bothers me. So what factors do we consider? Mechanism of action, response, physician experience, patient preference, cost, pregnancy, and many others. Stuart, how much time we have? Are we running late already?
10 minutes.
10 minutes to go. All right, let's go. Okay, so even with the medicines, a lot of patients experience attacks, flare-ups. How do we treat them? What should we do with those patients that have suddenly a flare-up, an attack, an exacerbation while receiving their treatment or not? Traditionally, we would use oral prednisone. You know, prednisone by mouth used to be the treatment of choice until the late 1990s. 1990s, there was a study, the optic neuritis trial, that showed that at least for optic neuritis, if you treat them with intravenous solumedrol, they tend to do better, and they have less chance of developing MS earlier. So IV solumedrol became kind of our workhorse, our main therapy for acute exacerbations. Well, ACTH is an old drug that's been in the market for a long time. It changed companies, and it's been getting a new push for its use. It's good for exacerbations as well. In general, most major attacks, IV solumedrol is going to be the drug of choice. And the rule of thumb that most neurologists use, if you're not responding to IV solumedrol, then ACTH should be a good option. An exception for that would be if you don't have any good IV access, okay? Because solumedrol, it goes through the vein. ACTH can be injected, subcutaneous into the muscle. So, but for the most, we save this for later because IV solumedrol, it costs, a few $100s. This is now at $30,000. So it's a big change in price. Some people say, they've been marketing it hardly, and it's a good medicine. It's as good as the other. But personally, I use it when there's failures. What about oral prednisone? Again, a few years ago, everybody started switching from oral prednisone to IV solumedrol. There's been some studies now from Spain, from Canada, from Central Europe, showing that high-dose oral prednisone can do the same. So for the most, every once in a while, I use oral prednisone. Major attacks, I still use IV solumedrol. Few cases refractory, we put them on ACTH. The good news, a lot of research, a lot of data. There's some stem cell studies coming on. Actually, there's a new study that started last month with bone marrow stem cells. I think at some point it's going to be something that's going to be useful, but right now it's still in experimental stages, and it's too hard, too complex, too dangerous to do in a big scale at this time. Symptomatic therapy, I'm going to go quickly over this. Fatigue is a common problem, as many of you know. It may be the more disabling problem with multiple sclerosis, and there's a lot of things to do. You don't have to eat your coffee, grains. There's some medicines, pace yourself, exercise, eat healthy, stay hydrated, split your exercise time. There's a lot of ways to deal with it. Take your naps. I love afternoon naps. I don't know why people don't do them. Walking and balance problem, is an issue, and honestly, you need to stay physically active. It doesn't matter what you do. Exercise can potentially help. It helps you maintain what you have. It's going to cut down the chance of use of cane, use of wheelchair, etc. So you want to stay physically active. For some patients, there's a medicine called Ampira that has been proven to help some with walking. When it came out, I refused to use it because it was too expensive. But honestly, it's not my choice. If it's covered and you need it, why not get it? But it helps some people. It had some side effects. My rule of thumb: you're having walking balance difficulty, maybe for fatigue, for severe fatigue, or for heat intolerance. It's a good option to consider. Talk to your doctor about it. Constipation is a big issue, and there's a lot of things to do. And work on your basics: exercise, hydration, fruit and vegetables, 2 softeners. Mineral oil, milk of magnesia. You don't want to look like the fat guy here. Bladder urgency and incontinence is a common problem. For those, a lot of medicines, a lot of treatment. Pelvic exercise sometimes helps, so physical therapy can help. Those patients and the ones that have sexual dysfunction, I usually try to defer them to the urologist. I'm not a good sexual advisor, so trust me on that one. Depression is a problem. It's easy to treat, There's a lot of new, safer medicines to use. So if your doctor recommends, try an antidepressant. Don't take it bad. I mean, I'm sure the intentions are good. I mean, discuss why is it, but don't eliminate the possibility if depression is an issue. Nuedexta is a medicine that came out a few years ago that helped for labile affect. You know, if you have MS and you cannot control your outbursts of crying, and then something at the next minute you're laughing and then you're crying, that's a medicine that you can use. Memory, there's not a good treatment for it, but keep your mind active. And some of the best things you can do: physical exercise, mental exercise, stay busy, social activity, physical activity, they're critical. There's not a good treatment for that. We have this flyer in my office about things to do for the memory. So if you're my patient or not, you can stop by and get one of those. A lot of good advice about what to do to help your memory. Spasticity is a problem. There's a lot of medicines to use. In Europe, interestingly enough, there are about 10 countries that you can get marijuana in a nasal spray and use it intermittently for spasticity. And actually, the American Academy of Neurology did a study looking into that possibility. And this is what they said. American Academy of Neurology, they said, if tolerated and symptoms are not adequately controlled with standard therapy in patients with MS-related spasticity, it is established as effective, that oral cannabis can help controlling some of the symptoms. Not approved on the US. Don't tell anybody that I'm talking about this. I'm going to get into trouble. But the point is that, it may get approved at some point. It may be an option for patients. It's not going to be an option for the majority of patients. Natural therapies, we talk about the first one. Chinese herbs, a lot of people love herbs, even though they haven't been proven for the most to help a whole lot. But ginseng, astragalus, I don't know how to pronounce that, maitake mushrooms, they boost the immune system. They're not good for MS patients. So I like this one from Sanjay Gupta. The more common mistake that users of herbal medicine make is believing that the substance they take actually work. So if you're taking like 100 natural supplements, cut it down. You're spending a lot of money. Hot issues in MS, and we're finishing with this. Big hot issues in MS. Choosing Wisely campaign. It's a campaign that the American Academy of Neurology put out saying that for patients with progressive disease, there was no evidence that beta interferons and Copaxone help, and that you should reconsider continuing those medicines in people with a secondary progressive form. That have brought big discussion in the MS world. A lot of discussion about it. Recently, this medicine that many of us were hoping it was approved. It was not approved by the FDA. They're revising it. And another big issue is the cost of MS drugs. Incredible. It's becoming the more severe disease in terms of cost. Lose some weight, stay physically active, follow your doctor advice. And I really appreciate your time. And I'm going to stop here because I know I'm running late.
All right, so now we're ready for Q&A. I'm not the one running around now. Actually, we got our attorney to run around with the microphone. Imagine that. I'll put anybody to work, all right?
Now, if you don't mind, when I was coming in, they brought me some excellent questions. Can I address them quickly?
You could address them slowly, too.
Perfect. Yes. I don't know who brought me, but these were very good questions. So we'll go over them quickly. We covered many of them already. But the first question was, if a patient took Copaxone for many years but stopped it, now having a secondary progressive disease, would it be advisable to take Copaxone to stop further progression? I think most of us would say, any medicine could potentially help. Nothing has been proven to help on secondary progression, and that Wisely campaign, choosing Wisely campaign, that has brought a concern to neurologists that there's no data that Copaxone or interferons help. We don't know how the new ones help. So the answer to that question is, we don't know for sure, but if your condition is significantly progressive, you want to look for some of the newer, stronger therapies. If you don't recommend Copaxone, for those patients, what would you recommend? Tysabri could be an option. Techfidera, fingolimod are good, stronger options to consider. Another question was about the balance. The physical therapy told my patient, this patient, that the physical therapy can, quote unquote, retrain the brain to correct problems. Is that true? And I think to some extent it is. I mean, some exercises, strengthening can help some of the deficit. It may not cure your problem. Yes, I often consider physical therapy on patients that are having motor problems. You're not going to get a resolution of the problem, but can get some improvement. Let's take some of the questions here, and then we'll cover the next ones here.
Just so you know, I also have a 3-part question for you, okay?
Okay.
But if anybody else has a question that they don't want to orally give and you want to just write it down and give it to me, I'll be more than happy to ask for you. I like to talk anyway.
On one of your slides, you had listed that grains are not good for people with MS to consume, in addition to salt and other things. What is negative about grains?
Well, the data on that, even though a few people support it strongly, is not everybody believe that there's a problem with grains. Now, grains do have, they have a high caloric index, so they have, tend to have higher carbohydrates. The other thing is that they have is a protein called lectin. So lectin is a protein that is a sticky protein found in legumes and grains that it kind of attached to other proteins, and it's very sticky to the gut. So it sticks to the gut, and it helps opening entrance to other proteins that should normally don't come into the body, allow the entrance to it. There's a study from Colorado, University of Colorado, talking about that. My point regarding that is that, cut them down a little bit. It's not clear to me if it's really an effect, and maybe in 2 years I tell you, eat grains. I eat my cereals every once in a while. So I don't think it's a strong effect, but I think it's something that people are looking as having a possible effect on increasing autoimmune problems on patients with autoimmune disorders. Okay? Good observation, by the way.
My question is from the same slide. Legumes were listed.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the same?
Same thing. Peanuts, for example.
Right.
People think of nuts, and I always tell my patients, nuts are healthy. But interestingly enough, peanuts are not nuts. They're legumes. If you think about it, a lot of people have allergies to peanuts. They can eat cashews, pistachios, macadamia nuts, walnuts, Those others, nuts family, they're healthy, high protein, good snack. I'd rather you have tons of nuts in your house than baked goods, cookies, ice cream, cakes, etc. They're healthy, so they're a good snack, but peanuts usually are not, but it's the same reason. It's for the lectins. Again, that's something that a lot of people argue. Listen, we don't know about that for sure. There's only a few people working on that are pushing for that. And I don't know really, but it's something coming out. It's just something for us to be aware, because it may be a factor. And you know what? If I can cut the nuts and the grains and the carbohydrates and have my MS better control, it's worth doing it.
In that category, I'm thinking along the lines more of the bean family, like, beans, lentils. Is that a good or no?
Again, there's a Dr. Cord, and you may want to look at this, Dr. Cordain, Cordain. He was in Ocala in a talk a couple of years ago talking about this topic. He's from the University of Colorado, and if you ask him or look at his website, he's going to tell you, don't eat any grains, don't eat any legumes. A lot of people will tell you, the data is just not strong enough to give a general statement that you need to stop them. So my advice is, you may want to cut them down, but, I wouldn't take that pressure of your life.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm still looking for a miracle fix. Beyond physical therapy, exercise, and Empira, is there any other thing to work with helping the balance?
I think you probably mentioned all of them there. I mean, I think people overlook exercise a lot. I mean, I think if you have your ability to get up from a chair, if you can maintain that longer, are going to make a huge difference for your quality of life and your caretaker. So what's the best thing for that? Exercise, walking, leg exercise, steps, try those steppers, squats for some people, if you can do those, if you haven't done them, let me tell you that the perfect squat, you want to have your back straight, you want to have your shoulders back, you want to have a chair behind when you start doing them so you don't fall. and then squat down with your back straight. Excellent exercise for your thigh and hip muscles. That's something that you should be doing if you can do them on a regular basis. But staying physically active is the best thing you can do. Stretching, yoga, Tai Chi. There have been some studies on Tai Chi, not for MS, but for Parkinson's disease. Excellent data on maintenance of weight. So the point is, I don't care what you do. Just keep on moving. Yeah. Yes?
Just so everybody knows, if you use the videos that we have on our website, we've done many programs where we have a personal trainer work with and teaching adaptive exercise for those with multiple sclerosis. And one of the biggest things that he has on there is the squats. So, he shows you how to do these things. He shows you how to work with bands and creating energy that you didn't have and showing you how to use it. So again, if you go to the website and you look at these things up on our YouTube channel, there's plenty there for you to look at with the exercise, and you'll find that you can do a lot of it. Even if you can't get out of your chair, there are things for you to do. Yes. Okay? There's plenty for you to look at. 3-part question before we go forward here. Is Lemtrada going to get the ability to possibly get back on the market? To get on the market?
Yeah, so Lemtrada is alemtuzumab. It's a monoclonal antibody, powerful immunosuppressant. It kind of wipe out your B cells and T cells. It seems like an excellent choice for patients with severe MS that are progressing strongly and quickly. But the FDA decided not to approve it recently. So FDA is receiving a lot of letters from the MS community. Many of people in the MS community felt like, we want to have that tool. If a patient is getting so bad so quick, why don't take the risk that the immunosuppression that the medicine costs can do? It also causes about 30% risk of autoimmune diseases through the years. So a lot of side effects, somewhat dangerous drug, easy to use. You use I think it's 5 injections, and then you may repeat 3 injections in a year. I don't know if it's going to get back in the market. It's approved in some other countries. I think it gets approved. I think the concern that the FDA have is it going to be overused and cause a lot more problem than benefit? But I think we should have that choice. I wouldn't use it that often, but there's a few cases that I probably would have.
But before I get to the other questions on this same topic, we have a petition running because we also feel that there should be choice for this other medication. If you want to sign our petition, you want to read it and see what this is all about, then just, again, either contact me or go to our website and find where the petition is at. It's a drug that I also feel probably should be out there, but I'm not a doctor, so I got to let you know that too.
That's one of the hot issues.
I'm not a doctor, right? All right, so you spelled Amtuzum, whatever.
I did it wrong?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
I'm sure that's
missing a few letters there.
I'm sure that's not the only misspelling there.
Okay. So if it's not available here, can a doctor prescribe it off-label for use with MS?
I think it's approved for other conditions, non-MS. Any medicine that is approved, you have the choice to prescribe it. But chances are that insurance is not going to cover. So, you want to make sure you check with your insurance before you take a medicine that's, I don't know, it's going to be on the $60,000 probably price. So you have to be careful with it. But I don't know for sure if right now I can write a prescription, but I'll check that out.
From what I've heard, you can't.
You can't?
You can't. And not for MS. It's used for leukemia.
It's used for leukemia.
Under CAMPATH, right? So, but again, this is just something that everybody's looking into and trying to get it so that the FDA looks at it again. Going forward, the last part of this question, 3-part question is, what about getting it in Canada or Mexico? And this could also work, for your answer to do with other things like stem cell, the cautions that have to be looked at.
Well, with stem cells, you have to be careful because you can go to Moscow, Russia, and they have more stem cell clinics than any other place in the world, totally non-regulated. They use it for Parkinson's disease, MS, without any evidence that it helps. So I would recommend that if you want stem cell, contact the MS Society, get into the website, look what they're doing, the studies on that. That's what you should do, rather than go to the clinic of my cousin in Mexico and get that infused. Getting alemtuzumab from other countries, I mean, I guess you can probably do it. I haven't ventured that area.
When people ask me that question, I ask them who's going to follow you with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have patients that have gone to. I have a patient that went to Mexico for stem cell infusion into the spinal cord. That was for Parkinson's disease. I have a patient with Lou Gehrig disease that went to Germany for an infusion. You know, it's hard when they come back. It's like, what do you tell them? How do you follow? How do you manage the side effect? I mean. The good thing is that even though that medication so far is not approved, I mean, we have a lot of new options in our hands. So at least I feel like, you know, in the Tysabri, the fingolimod, the Techfidera, those are still good options to consider. And I think combination therapy, you know, should be an option, but we don't have studies. None of these companies are doing studies comparing the efficacy because many of these drugs work in different mechanisms that are going to be likely complementary. But we don't know that yet. So we have now 10 medicines in the market, 6 different categories of medicines. We don't know if we can use them together, which is kind of silly, but that's the way the market works. There was another question for me. I think I talked about that. The question was, would you give your patients Actar? And I think I mentioned that already. I would use it in patients that are non-responsive to oral steroids high dose and or to IV solumetrol. I wouldn't use it as a routine basis. I think the data is not there, just too costly for it. Maybe I'm just too frugal. Any other question there?
Doctor, in reference to beta-seron, I take beta-seron now and have taken it for many, many years. What markers or what things should I keep in mind as to decide if it's being effective or not effective?
But I mean, a good basic rule of thumb is if you're doing well, your condition is stable, you're not progressing, don't stir the water, don't change it, don't do anything about it. If you're showing some progression, the marker that you have to check are 2. MRI with contrast, you know, and gadolinium to see if there's any enhancing lesion or progression of the disease. And number 2, the neutralizing antibody. The neutralizing antibody test is a test that tests if you have developed immunity against the beta-seron. Those are the 2 things. But if you're doing fine, I wouldn't worry. Don't worry, be happy.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Back in the dark ages, in 1983, when they were diagnosing or trying to diagnose MS and couldn't very well, didn't have any MRIs, didn't have this, didn't have that. They did do a spinal tap. I had a spinal tap done, and I was told the oligoclonal bands did indicate MS. But then there were other things in the test that, like protein or some level, that really didn't. And then I've read recently that really if that was today, it would have been a definite, yeah, that it is MS. So is that true? I mean, is that?
Well, spinal tap help with the diagnosis in many cases. Most of the time with the clinical findings, the history and the MRI, you can make a diagnosis, and that's why we're not doing spinal taps in everybody now. The oligoclonal bands, which is one of the most important things we look in the spinal fluid, you can have oligoclonal bands from strokes or from other infections, so they're not specific for MS. Mm-hmm. I used to order something called the myelin basic protein. Again, not specific for MS. So there's nothing specific for MS on the spinal fluid yet, but the findings on the spinal fluid can help diagnose or confirm the diagnosis. If I see somebody, let's say 60 years old, come to my office, a couple of MS-type looking lesion, at that age, we often see small strokes. Those patients do a spinal tap. If you see oligoclonal bands, you know, it helps you lean toward, confirm, or at least make a presumptive diagnosis. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, if there's any more.
Uh-oh. You know what they want, Doc.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting
Thank
Thank you so much.
Let's thank Dr. and Craig. Thank you. I want to thank them both strongly for coming here and doing this today.